Hey everybody, my name's Ed. Okay, so we're going to do another trade review, and this time it is going to be Daredevil Born Again. My version is from 1987. So basically, it is a Daredevil story by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. It was a highly influential comic book when it came out. Elements of the stories have popped up in some of the live action DD movies and TV shows. It's definitely a classic Daredevil story arc, and it's become one of Marvel's evergreen trades. Okay, so just to back up a little bit, during Frank Miller's first run on Daredevil from the late 70s to early 80s, Frank Miller pretty much transformed Daredevil from a Spider-Man knockoff character to a pretty innovative title. Frank eventually took over the writing as well as the art. He brought a different visual approach, integrating not just Jack Kirby and Gil Kane, but guys like Jim Steranko, Will Eisner, and others. On the writing side, Frank incorporated more crime and film noir elements, as well as then popular Mystic Ninja characters. Frank made Daredevil one of Marvel's better sellers, and then he left to go to DC to do The Dark Knight Returns, Ronin, and he became pretty much a mainstream comic superstar. A couple of years later, Miller came back to Marvel to work on Daredevil and Elektra Assassin. So it's a lot of excitement from fans when he returned to the main Daredevil title. So the plot here is basically starts, excuse me, with sorry, excuse me, Karen Page, who was Daredevil slash Matt Murdock's love interest in the 60s comics, and she was kind of written out of the series in the early 70s. So in story, she left New York to go to LA hoping to become an actress, and instead she becomes a heroin junkie, and she sells Matt's secret idea of as Daredevil for a fix. So the Kingpin eventually finds out, and instead of making it public, he used the information to destroy Matt's private life and his career as a lawyer. So Kingpin manages to get Matt disbarred, blows up his home, leaves him emotionally broken. After humiliating Matt, Kingpin ultimately tries to kill him. The story shows us Matt's mental struggles as well as his life falling apart, and then it shows him climbing back to regain his dignity and ultimately face his adversary. Parallels to Matt's story, we also see Karen's journey to escape drug abuse and the men who are trying to kill her. And then we also get Ben Urich, who is a reporter who's also incidentally knows Matt's secret identity, and he's attempting to write an expose on the Kingpin, and he's dealing with threats to his family because of it. And before the story's over, excuse me, a few unexpected characters pop up, and we're presented with a couple of interesting twists and revelations. And the story ends in a way that could have been a setup for a new status quo for Matt, but it looks like the Marvel editors didn't quite proceed with it. So Born Again, it's pretty much a superhero story, of course, but Miller and Mazzucchelli take it to excuse me, taking a different storytelling approach than some comics of the same genre and pushed it to some interesting territory. It turns established Daredevil myths and tropes that were established in the 60s and 70s, and even the ones that Frank himself used during his first run in early 80s, on its head and basically subverts what the reader might expect from such a story, even beyond putting the main character through hardships. It completely upends the Daredevil Matt Murdock as a character and flips the environment that he operates in. So he loses his job as an attorney, he loses his support cast, and he can't be sure that he can trust his own perceptions of his situation. Now, although the comic has fantastical elements, it feels, quote unquote, feels more grounded. It's still Cape Comics, but the subject matter is darker, the atmosphere is moodier, it's full of multiple shifting first person narrations and fight scenes, and it feels like an action movie. Miller's dialogue is crisp and it's fast moving, and it's free from a lot of thin comic book cliched speech, but it's packaged in a very comic book way where the design and storytelling and the combination of text and visuals is what draws you in rather than making it cinematic or what we these days call widescreen action in comics. So again, this Born Again is a gritty, intense story about revenge and desperation, but it's also about hope and redemption and forgiveness. It plays out as a crime drama as much as a superhero story. We see the Kingpin bring down Matt not through violence or superpowers, but through his crime connections and political corruption. Matt's pushed to his limits and beyond, and is actually defeated. But we do see Matt's redemption. We also see that of characters, again, of Karen and Ben at the beginning of the story. All these characters have fallen short of their ideas, but they find a way to make their way back up. Get a little religious subtext, right? We touch on Matt's Catholicism, both literal and symbolic, without giving too much away. The story's called Born Again, and in a certain way, Matt does do penance, and he works his way back through to a place of grace. So now, I wanted to bring this up. Born Again also touches on other social issues that, and it really taps into the zeitgeist of the mid 80s. So drug abuse was very much a top concern for American cities. Then you have the Dare and the Mad commercials that were, Mothers Against Drunk Driving commercials that were on TV constantly. The Reagan administration really amped up the war on drugs, excuse me, both through litigation and rhetoric. And so it made perfect narrative sense for Karen to return to Matt as a failed actress who's become a drug addict. The United States of America has had a complicated relationship with Latin America for like generations, everything from the United Fruit Company instigating war in Central America to Fidel Castro assassination attempts in Cuba. In the 80s, Reagan's war against communism had us supporting the Contras in Nicaragua and the government in El Salvador. And the U.S. people weren't quite hungry, weren't quite in a hurry, I should say, to get involved in another ground war so soon after Vietnam. So this led to the so-called dirty war in Latin America, where Reagan administration found a way around all that by sending in CIA consultants and giving under-the-table funding to these conflicts, most notoriously in a form of Contragate. And the character of Nuke here, who's kind of this mentally unstable super soldier, is a pretty good representation of all this. Now, having said all that, like I said, it's still a superhero comic in the sense that it's ultimately a costume hero who saves the day, and that aspect of the tale is not questioned and in fact reaffirmed and celebrated, but the story does get at some deeper emotional truths rather than just soap opera, although of course the melodramatic elements are of course there. Just to talk about the art a little bit, David Mazzucchelli has an interesting artist with a great sense of design and storytelling on this book, and he really knocks it out of the park. Mazzucchelli has been able to change up his style for different projects. Check out something like City of Glass or Asterio Polyp. But here he mostly sticks to a pretty mainstream superhero style. But within that framework, he leans into some interesting expressionistic takes. On one hand, you've got the Frank Miller, John Buscema influence, but there's also stuff like Milton Caniff, Bill Sienkiewicz, and probably a few others. There's interesting use of backgrounds that are detailed when they needed to be, but they're sometimes really sparse, and when it works to that effect, David does give a great mix of angles and vertical and horizontal layouts versus traditional grids. There's a nice use of shadows and rendering, but he doesn't really overdo it, and how he chooses to use like light versus dark and detail versus simplicity. On a whole, the elements are all pretty well balanced. And just to give you a little shot of some of that. Okay, so just to give you, we got some pretty straightforward layouts here, right? Okay, right? This is Matt in his apartment, okay? You get these interesting kind of takes here, right? Pretty straightforward, a little cinematic, but not, like I said, not that widescreen action sort of thing. Here, you get some detail and whatnot. Here we've got the kind of film noir elements here. And this is all very kind of Will Eisner, Jim Steranko, filtered through Frank Miller, right? Okay. And just to jump ahead, here's some more of that flavor again. With the crazy, you got the horizontal panels there. Then you got breaking everything down into the long vertical panels. Sure. And let's see here. And I think I wanted to put this. Sorry, excuse me. More of that sort of, let's just play with the panels versus the text. So it's panel, 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 you know, long vertical panel, 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 and here you get the whole sort of thing, the text and the dialogue working on top of it, each other. You know, just a really cool effect there. And at the same time, you see how we're pulling back as the text and the dialogue seems to get a little bit more normal. And that leads to a pretty cool splash here where we figure out exactly where Matt is, right? And then we're back to kind of normal storytelling. Oh, and I did want to do this. This is a pretty interesting scene here where you got Ben Urich. He's in the, he's at the newspaper. He's getting a phone call. And we cut to the hospital where a cop who's been giving him information is staying. His editors are kind of yelling at him, you know, you need to get to work. It's all kind of normal here. So cut here, cut here, cut here. And then as things get more and more dramatic, right, you see we're starting to get more of a close-up of Ben's face here. And as something horrible is going on, it gets more and more abstract here, right? And it's just a really cool, or just a really cool mood thing here, really cool abstract thing there. So, okay. And then, what else is going on here? Oh, here's some of the action. Here we get Nuke, our boys. I should probably mention too, you know, the whole kind of back to Vietnam movies were really big at this time too. Rambo, Platoon, all that sort of thing. All right. So, okay, so I don't want to give too much of it away. So we're going to wrap up. So again, Daredevil, Born Again by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. It's a high watermark for them as creators and one of the standout comics of the era. It's Miller and Mazzucchelli at their height, delivering a tense tale with compelling character development, crime drama, and superhero symbolism. It is got a gripping script with innovative visuals. It's a story about violence and desperation and political and criminal corruption, but it's also about hope and redemption. Miller plays this out in Matt's arc, but again, we get it in Ben's arc and Karen's arc as separately, and all those arcs kind of converge and weave through other topics and issues of the time that still resonate. Mazzucchelli provides a good art with a mix of influence and styles and a strong sense of design and storytelling. This story, along with Frank's other work, took superheroes to a darker direction for a while, but the material here still stands up as one of their better books of the grim and gritty era, and with a historic moment in the Daredevil title. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for listening. I do appreciate it. You guys have a great day. Thanks. Hey.